Yuka Roya joins me in the studio. Hi, Yuka.
Hi, Inka.
So the European Union appears to be taking a page out of Donald Trump's protectionist playbook on steel.
Yeah, the European Commission has proposed cutting free trade quotas by 47% to 18.3 million tonnes for steel and steel products, while doubling the out-of-quota duty to 50%. The EU's new strategy mirrors the one embraced by the US president, who slapped 50% tariffs on steel imports, including on European steel, which still remain in place despite a recent trade deal. Washington's protectionist move has raised concern that cheap metals diverted from the US market by the higher tariffs would flood European markets. The primary target is China, which is by far the largest exporter of steel. Last year, China accounted for more than half of the roughly 1.9 billion tonnes of crude steel produced around the world and is accused of helping fuel a global oversupply of steel. Here's the EU's Trade Commissioner speaking earlier.
The global overcapacity crisis is reaching critical levels. On top of this, third countries are closing off their markets. They are raising tariffs, they are introducing safeguards, while the EU market remains largely open and under intense import pressure. In just a decade, the EU steel trade balance has deteriorated dramatically, from 11 million tonne surplus to 10 million tonne deficit.
Well, Yuka, trade remains high on the agenda as US President Donald Trump hosts Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney in the Oval Office.
Well, it's the second White House visit for Mr. Carney, who took over as Prime Minister from Justin Trudeau in March. The Trump administration has slapped steep tariffs on Canadian cars, steel and aluminium, and it's preparing to introduce new duties on softwood and lumber. After initially hitting back with tit-for-tat tariffs, Ottawa has since abandoned that approach and made significant concessions. Still, Canada's economy is suffering, and the two sides have not reached a bilateral deal. For now, a majority of Canadian exports remain protected by a US-Canada-Mexico free trade agreement, but that will come up for renegotiation soon. The two leaders struck a cordial tone before they headed off to a closed-door meeting. Let's take a listen.
The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company. And they want steel and we want steel. And, so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict. Nothing wrong with it. And I think we've come a long way over the last few months, actually.
There are areas, as the President just said, where conflict, maybe not so much conflict, we compete. There are areas where we compete, and it's in those areas where we have to come to an agreement that works. But there are more areas where we are stronger together, and that's what we're focused on.
Well, the US president has also voiced optimism about a real chance to end the war in Gaza 2 years on from the conflict that has left the enclave in tatters.
Yeah, Yinka, we know that the situation is dire there. More than 500,000 people in Gaza are facing famine as the cost of fuel and food has skyrocketed. Almost all economic activity has come to a standstill. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority also seems to be holding on by a thread. Luke Schrago takes a deeper look.
Since Israel went to war in Gaza in October 2023, the Palestinian enclave's economy has fallen off a cliff. With its infrastructure and arable land in ruins, nearly every household is living in poverty and reliant on humanitarian aid. Inflation surged by over 230% in 2024, according to a recent World Bank report, which outlined dire circumstances.
Recovery and reconstruction needs in the short, medium and long term across the Gaza Strip are estimated at $53.2 billion, which is equivalent to over 3 times the pre-conflict annual GDP of the West Bank and Gaza together.
The economic spillover into the West Bank is also worse than ever, with Israel clamping down on both the movement of Palestinian workers and tax revenue.
Workers in Israel were the primary source of income to the Palestinian economy, and other sectors were other sources too. What makes the economic situation worse is the Israelis are withholding the funds.
Israel collects duty on goods passing through its territory to the West Bank and makes monthly transfers to Ramallah. But it's been withholding clearance revenues since the start of the war, amounting to 68% of the Palestinian Authority's budget. Since May, that's the equivalent of over €2.5 billion. money that's no longer available for public services like schools, pensions, the health service or salaries, which fell to half their normal levels in June. What's more, the Israeli finance minister cut off all possibility of Israeli and Palestinian banks interacting in June, intent on economically strangling the territory to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state.
And here in France, Yuka, the political crisis has reached a new peak and financial markets have reacted.
Well, French stocks have somewhat recovered from a heavy sell-off on Monday, triggered by the resignation of Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu less than 14 hours after announcing a new cabinet. The deepening political crisis makes it almost impossible for France's divided parliament to pass next year's budget on time. For it to become law by the 31st of December, the bill needs to be presented to Parliament by October the 13th at the very latest, a deadline that looks increasingly unattainable. A US-style government shutdown, though, won't happen here, as in the case of last year, the French government can keep running on an extension of this year's budget until a new budget is adopted. But that scenario will likely worsen France's already strained public finances. Mr. Lecornu has now been tasked by the president to hold last-ditch talks with other political parties to try and resolve the deadlock. But the heightened uncertainty has sent France's borrowing costs higher, which has already soared over the past 5 years. The spread between French and German 10-year bond yields has now widened to more than 86 basis points, meaning the interest France has to pay is almost 0.9% higher than for Germany. And that's it from the business desk.
Yuka, appreciate that update in business. Thank you so much for that. Stay with us here on Prime News Paris. We're going to take a very short break.